afternoon and welcome. I'm Michael Robinson. My guest today is Marvin Scott, an 11-time Emmy Award-winning journalist and member of the New York State Broadcasters Hall of Fame. He has interviewed 6 presidents and top Hollywood celebrities, visited the front lines of war in the Middle East and Asia, and witnessed the rise of America's space program. His latest book is entitled As I Saw It, A Reporter's Intrepid Journey. Marvin has celebrated over 38 years working in New York City's WPIX-11. Welcome to the show, Marvin. It's great to have you again.
It's good to be with you, Michael. How are you today?
I am great. I'm great, thanks. So I have so many questions for you. You have been around the block. You've seen many things happen. And I want to know about what your thoughts are regarding what's happening in journalism today, because so much has happened in the past election cycle. You hear the word fake news over and over again. What are your thoughts about all of this? How do you feel about it?
Very sad. It's unfortunate what is happening, and we are an honorable profession. I am so proud that I've been a part of it for the past 50 plus years. Much of this has occurred, I would say, in the last 25, 30 years. Since the advent of social media, much of the fake news is generated by social media.
Mm-hmm.
You have these websites like Onion, which satirize the news, and people take what they see there as fact. So it begins there. The fake news is there. There are the satirical websites, which sometimes mainstream media will pick up what's on one of those websites and take it out with proper verification. But let me talk about mainstream media. We're not without fault. There are those who do make errors and fail to do enough of the verification and the fact checking. And there have been errors and there have been consequences. They have been castigated. They have been fired. They have been suspended. One of the saddest things for me is someone who I have the greatest respect for as a journalist, Brian Ross at ABC. He recently made errors in his report, not proper verification. Look what happened back years ago with Dan Rather. He had a producer who had a story and was not properly vetted. So it happens, but I also point this out, Michael. What other profession has such visibility? How many people are watching a doctor do a job each day, a lawyer, a teacher,
Right.
whomever? We are visible, and that gives us a greater responsibility to the people who are listening or reading us, watching us. And yes, we do make errors. We're not without fault. But overall, I think we are the bedrock of our democracy, to be able to inform the people. But also it's changed with mainstream media, because there are, of the 800 television stations and cable stations, there are those that offer opinion. You have MSNBC, you have Fox, you have CNN. What I recommend is watch a half hour of Fox, watch a half hour of MSNBC.
To have a balanced approach, yes.
Me, I avoid commenting. People don't know whether I'm right or left or center. I'm a I've been telling.
So my question to you, I have a question. Do you think the president, in his beating up of the media, he talks about fake news all the time. He talks about fake news being misrepresenting his facts or the facts in general. Do you think that adds to people's distrust in the media as we see it, or is that just something that has happened in all presidential
no question
leadership?
No question. Every president has had some rift with the media. It goes back to Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon, who said you're not going to have Richard Nixon to kick around anymore after he lost the gubernatorial race in California. And he came back. Ronald Reagan had differences. JFK had every president's had differences. But I think it has never reached the severity that we are now witnessing with the current president. He calls out fake news when there's a story that is not to his favor, calls it fake news. Yes, there is somewhat of a vindication of him with the release of this confidential, this memo. I think he is experiencing more negative news than some of his predecessors. And every time there is something negative about him, he cries out false news. The sad part of it is some of it has been justified, not fake news, but inaccurate news. Inaccurate news is quite different from fake news. It's when you're making up and conceiving a story, which is his perception. So it is a sad and sends a wrong message. I was looking up something recently for a speech, and I found out there are at least 10 countries out there that imprison
Mm.
journalists if they write something against their leadership. And some are in jail, some have even been executed. We are a free society, a democracy, and we can get up. We can satirize. We can have a Saturday Night Live, and we can satirize our president. In other countries, they'll execute you for that.
Hmm.
So I think there is an existence of some irresponsible reporting. Fake news you'll find mostly on social media, in my opinion, and there is some irresponsibility, and we have to tighten that. I think we need more editorial control. We have lost some of that. In my 5 decades in this business, I have seen that the control and the editorial checkpoint that we have had has dissipated in so many media operations. We have lost over 100, yes, over 100 newspapers in this country over
Mm.
the past 20 years. That's sad. News magazines, they've gone online. They're not sold any longer hard copy. Walter Cronkite once said that television news is nothing more than a headline news service, that people have an obligation to read a newspaper, read a news magazine, and really get your whole sense of it. You can't get it in a 2-minute report on television or on radio. You have to really get into the depth of it to understand what's going on in government, to understand our economy.
Yeah.
But people today, in my opinion, they want to be spoon-fed the news.
Right.
Give it to them and think for them.
And unfortunately, I think social media plays a big role in providing misinformation to people. And the people who oftentimes put content on social media are not professional reporters or anchors, and
Can I give
therefore
you
they have no
said
knowledge of vetting. So the information is out there, and people think it's factual, and therefore run with it.
well?
You were
What about
saying?
what better account, Michael, than the example of a man who was alleged to have shot up a man who shot up a Washington D.C. pizzeria after reading that it was home to a child slavery ring run by Hillary Clinton.
Mhm.
Totally erroneous. But look what that resulted in. The man took it to be so real, he took some action, some really adverse action that is unconscionable.
Right.
Other examples. Look at this one. There was a fake story on social media. Congress plotting to overthrow President Trump. Here was another one. The Quran and the Holy Bible are the same. Uh, Man sells son for an iPhone. And get this one. Transgender tampons are now on the market. These are items that I kid you not have been on social media.
Yes, yes, it's incredible. Now, what are your thoughts about the government and policing the news? Now, I'm against it personally. I think it will
That's
infringe upon our First Amendment, but
correct.
at some point, we have to be responsible for the content of information that's out there as consumers of news. A lot of people are innocent victims of misinformation. Should there be some sort of, I think, come to think about it, I think Facebook started some sort of a campaign at the beginning of the year where they
Yes.
were saying that they wanted to monitor information that was put out there and kind of, I guess, sort of highlight sources that they thought were questionable. Now, if I were to take that ideology outside of Facebook being a privately held company and say, should the government be more involved in ensuring that information that's out there is a lot more factual versus
Absolutely, unequivocally, no. The government should not have a role. I think more important is we have to do a better job of policing ourselves.
Hmm.
We need a better vetting process. We need better fact checking. We have to know who our sources are. We cannot be fed fake news.
Mhm.
This is what I feel. The government takes over the media and free speech and free writing, free television, radio, whatever have you. Then we have lost a major part of our democracy.
Mhm.
We are freedom of speech and the press, it's the very bedrock of our democracy. When you take a look over the years, how much good the media has done, the exposés that have corrected things in our system. Look at it, Watergate. Watergate, I mean, people were damning Woodward and Bernstein while they were working on this.
Mhm.
But look what they accomplished. We journalists at that time, we were heroes. Now we're viewed as scoundrels. Very, very sad.
Mhm. Tell me, do you see any similarities between Watergate and what's happening now in our administration?
Somewhat, somewhat. You have different circumstances. Uh, you're looking at things and allegations, and it leaves some skepticism in your mind. You're skeptical of what's going on. I think a lot of it too is we're influenced by what we see as the fictional stories in television series.
Mhm.
You see the TV shows, and it makes you wonder: is this true or is it not? So, uh, yeah, I see some correlation between it because there's the secrecy that exists in the intelligence community, and there are the constant denials and new assertions that come up. Was Russia involved? Was Hillary Clinton doing some underhanded things? So it makes the public more question whether our government is on the up and up. That's a very unfortunate thing.
Mhm. Mhm. It's interesting. I'm looking at everything from sort of like a saturated perspective. I mean, I hear the news these days, and sometimes it's sort of like the information seems so incredulous, and I'm thinking, has it always been this way, right? I mean, I hear the president saying things that are either insulting or rude or beneath the office, to be frank. And I'm thinking, this is incredible. We're living in a time where our institution, our democracy, is being threatened by someone who thinks it's okay to not only tweet on a regular basis, which is fine. I mean, if that's what he wants to do, that's fine. But when it's insulting, when it's demeaning, when it's actually questioning our social position as a country, our social democracy, it is troubling.
It's
How
troubling.
you have seen this for the past 50 years. What are your thoughts? Have there been any other presidents doing this in past that I may not be aware of? Or am I just in the dark here?
First of all, they didn't have access. They didn't have access to Twitter to do the tweets. President Trump has access, I think, to around 80 million people he reaches. And understand that that is what helped him win the presidency in the first place. He was able to get directly to the people, and that's why he argues it is important for him to stay on the Twitter account. No other president had that opportunity. It sends a wrong message. I think when he sends some of these tweets out, he starts the name calling. It's beneath the president, and his inner circle has tried. His own daughter has tried to get him to stop tweeting. He does not do it. I have known Donald Trump since 1979. I've known him here in New York. I've covered him here in New York. I've been with him at social functions and all. And he's the same person I knew back in 1979. He does things his own way. And his own way is he wants to communicate and say whatever he wants to say. He shoots the hip. And it is beneath the office to do the name calling that he has done. And I, for one, as a journalist, would hope that he would cease that and deal with the important factors of the office. I felt he delivered a very good State of the Union address, and as those who were sitting in the room with me say afterwards, what is he going to do next? Let him rest on his laurels for a good speech and not follow it up by writing something that's going to have people shaking their heads next day when they see what he's going to tweet.
Right. That's true. Because a lot of times he can say something amazing, like you said, the State of the Union was quite impressive, and then the next day it could be something else completely out of the ballpark. Now,
He's unpredictable.
you have met and interviewed some of the most amazing people in this world. Who was the most interesting and why?
Gosh. Uh, to look back, I get asked that question, and I always have to pause for a moment, Michael. I would go back, interesting, and it's such an eclectic grouping. It would go from Martin Luther King, I would probably have to say, was incredible.
Wow.
JFK was incredible. Yasser Arafat was interesting in his underground bunker in Beirut.
Did you actually go there?
Yes, sat with him on a Saturday night at an 11:30 p.m. interview. I was doing a story for Parade magazine on the children of the PLO, and I was granted an interview, and it was intriguing. I walked into it. Actually looked like a finished basement in the residential section of Beirut. Walked in, and it was a smoke-filled room. I remember seeing all these people sitting there, smoking Marlboro cigarettes, playing with their worry beads, and their Kalashnikov were resting against desks. And suddenly the inner door of a chamber opened, and there was Arafat and his inner circle, and I was ushered in. He was very, I have to tell you, he was a bit charismatic. He seemed unkempt, wearing his keffiyeh and everything else. But he greeted me, and he was very charming. And we sat for a half hour. My story was on the children of the PLO. Were they being inculcated to hate? And that was the rest of it. But he saw it as an option. It's interesting because on this long table, I found about a dozen copies of Parade magazine, copies in which I had written stories, so they had checked me out. And he had hoped, because at the time I think the circulation was about 70 million, and his expectation was he was able to get one of his political messages across. But that's not where I wanted to go. I wanted to go to children. And we chatted, and at one point, I asked him if the children were being inculcated to hate. And he said no, but I didn't get a quotable response from him. So about 10 minutes later, I asked the same question, phrasing it a bit differently, but it was the same question. And his Harvard-educated publicist, Mahmoud Labadi, sitting next to me, leaned over, whispered in my ear, "You asked the same question again. The interview is terminated."
Wow.
Okay. I was given 30 minutes with him, so I continued. I still wasn't getting, I think, for the story, I got one quote out of it. Just about at the end of the interview, I rephrased that same question. Mahmoud Labadi went like this: "The interview is terminated." Arafat, "Oh, let him continue." And we did for another 10 minutes, went beyond the time I was supposed to have.
Did he answer your question?
Never, no. I asked, well, can I ask he said, "You go ask the children yourself." I said, "I would like to." And then afterwards I went to an orphanage, but it ended, he handed me a photograph of an infant. Name was Fatmi Palestine. And he said to me, "Michael, to this day, it sounded like, take this back to New York." Sounded like. And it was the picture of an infant taken from the womb of her dead mother who was killed in an Israeli bombing raid. And he was trying to make a point. He tried to sell me and get his message point across, but it didn't succeed. I did use his quote, but an interesting story is the next day I went to an orphanage up in the Shuf Mountains at Souk El Kharab, and the headmaster had a bunch of children in the room with him, and he would translate my question. My question to this one boy, 12-year-old Tariq, was, "Can you ever see yourself living in peace with an Israeli boy your age?" Headmaster translated in Arabic, and the boy responded with a violent shaking of his head. I knew something was awry, but that moment wasn't the moment to ask. On the way back to Beirut, after my PLO guide was out of the car, of course, I asked my driver interpreter, So what did the headmaster ask him? I asked. Headmaster asked him, "Can you ever see yourself living in peace with a Zionist who wants to kill you?"
Huh.
Quite understandably. And I wrote that in the story.
Wow.
That was the,
Wow.
so yeah, Arafat was interesting. Years earlier, I had met Golda Meir in Jerusalem, and I happen to describe her, and I describe her in the book as grandma on steroids. It was question. She was the Iron Lady of Israel.
Very
The
charismatic woman.
person in the United States whose I will never ever forget will be Martin Luther King. I met Dr. King in 1966 when he picked up a march that was begun by James Meredith, who had broken the color barrier at the University of Mississippi. It was a march against fear, and he was gunned down by a sniper. He did survive, but he was hospitalized, and Dr. King and the other leaders of the civil rights movement vowed to continue the march. I stayed with him for a distance. I was with the Mutual Radio Network at the time, and I met Dr. King, and very, very impressive human being. I was surprised to see that he was very short. He was only 5'5" in height, but so much bigger in stature. I watched how he would deal with the protesters along the line of march who would try and taunt them and try to create some kind of problem and give them some justification to come in and start something violent. I saw them riding around in pickup trucks with lead pipes looking to start some kind of trouble. I had an opportunity during one of the breaks in the march to talk to him. I had just filed a report in the motel across the road, and on the way out, very hot night, I picked up a couple of Cokes from the vending machine. I think I stuffed one or two in my pocket, plus the one I was drinking. Across the road, there was Dr. King sitting on a dirt mound during the break. And I had previously met him. I said, "Okay, may I join you?" Yes. We were sitting for about 8-10 minutes, and I reached in my pocket, Dr. King, for like a Coke. I offered him a Coke. And we chatted. I asked him, because there had been threats on his life. And I said, "Dr. King, you have a family. Why do you do this?" And he had a pregnant pause in the eye, and he said, "For the children, for the children." And that has resonated in my mind all these years later, because all the children who have benefited by the sacrifices and the efforts he made all those years. And he also echoed the remarks he made in his speech in Washington about someday that we would judge a man not by the color of his skin, but by the content of his character. He did see that someday there would be an African-American leader in this country. That was back in 1966.
Wow.
Martin Luther King was quite impressive for me, but there were so many along the way. And going the other end of the spectrum, Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis was, in the end, he became a friend. 3 half-hour interviews over the years. One of them, which won an Emmy Award here in New York. And I have to tell you, that was a moment in my life, because to play straight man to the king of comedy, that was really a treat. There was no way of going through a whole half hour with him without him doing shtick. I asked him what he attributed his long, productive career. He went over 60 years, and he looked at me, 9. I was 9 then, I'm 9 now, and I got to show you.
Interesting.
There's Jerry.
Ah, wow. Very nice.
There he is. That was 19, where was it? This side. 1982. This was 2010, I think. He was on prednisone then. And then here's one. Get that up there. There we are when he got the Ellis Island Medal of Honor.
Ah, yes. Very nice.
Figure out how to get that. Oh, there we go.
That's very nice. Yes, and it's in screen. Yeah.
Yeah,
very
Jerry
nice.
Lewis.
Wow. That's an interesting journey. Thank you very much for sharing it with us, Marvin Scott. It's been a pleasure and an honor having you on my show, sir.
Michael, my pleasure. Good to be with you again.
Good to be with you as well.
Have a good day.
You too. We've come to the end of another Michael S. Robinson Show. Thank you all for being with us. I'm Michael Robinson.